but we're very excited to have all of you here. So thank you for joining us. I am Jen Peedy. I am the Vice President of Customer Advocacy for PeoplePath. PeoplePath is a talent management platform that aims to engage people throughout the employee lifecycle, from candidate through to alumni. And we believe that lifelong relationships are the foundation for mutual success. So I'm not actually sure who's sharing the screen, but if we could go to the next slide, that would be helpful. Is it Charlotte or Friedemann? I'm not sure. Technical issues.
Go ahead and continue, Jen. I will. I'll follow up with one of them, and there we go. Charlotte is now sharing.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. We don't have many slides this time around, but just to give anyone who isn't familiar with us and who is joining us for the first time, just that we are a global provider of these platforms, and we're a small but mighty company, and we stretch from Seattle through to Munich in Europe, and I'm actually based in California. So if you want to go to the next slide, that should just bring us to our gathering. So right now we're meeting virtually. We did this last year virtually as well. And so what I would love to get an idea is we're thinking about hosting everyone in person, possibly next year in New York for our in-person conference. So we're thinking late September, early October. It would be in New York. And as we're kind of planning, we're just trying to see, like, we're trying to get an idea of what your comfortability level is with joining in person. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. And just, it's all anonymous. We have no idea who's saying what from company, nothing. We just kind of giving an idea of, yes, you're absolutely in for joining us in person next year, or maybe not. Everyone's in a different place, especially given recent events. So please, take a look at that link in the chat and just drop your thoughts in there, and helps us as we're planning over the next few months to think about where we'll be next year. If you want to go to the next slide, this brings us to the meat of our panel today. So I'm very excited to be sharing with you that we have amazing clients who are going to talk about their program. So I'm excited to share that we have Sharon Light, Brenda Brock, and Alan Shaker with us today. They represent different industries such as law, technology, and construction. And so they have really interesting insights, different experiences, hopefully something for everyone. And so if you have any questions throughout this, please put it in the chat box, and we'll get to that at the end when we have a Q&A. I have a few questions for them that we'll kind of ask back and forth. But for now, I will let them introduce themselves. So Sharon, you're top of my screen, so maybe you go and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your program.
Great, thank you. Thank you for including me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I am the Director of Sustainability and Alumni Relations at Sidley Austin LLP, which is a global law firm operating in the United States, Europe, and Asia. Our alumni program dates back to about 2013, and I've been with the firm for 16 years now. So worked on developing and implementing and growing the program over the last 8 years or so. And we have about 7,000 alumni. So that's kind of the scope that we're dealing with. Just to briefly address the other part of my role is that I manage the firm's approach to environmental sustainability, which is something that's very new for us, and I contend has a lot of similarities with managing an alumni program, but that's a conversation for another day.
Sounds very exciting to wear two hats like that. Cool, thank you. Brendan, you're next on my list. Why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and your program?
Yeah, not a problem. Hi, everyone. Brandon Brock. I am a strategic project manager for IBM, and I was tasked with starting up our alumni program. Our alumni program dates back all the way to May of 2021. So we are fairly new to the alumni experience, but we can already tell it's very valuable. So I'm looking forward to the rest of today's conversation and just not only giving you all my experience, but hearing from you guys what your experiences are and where you're heading in your journeys.
Love that. Yeah, hopefully it's a really good discussion all around the world, all around the from the panel to the participants. So thank you for that. And Ellen, please let us know a little bit about you and your program.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Shaker. I am the Global Operations Manager for Bechtel's talent acquisition team. So for us, our alumni program, it is very recruiting focused. It is very much around staying in touch with folks that have left us with the hopes that they would come back to us in the future. So that's kind of why we sit under TA. If for those who are not familiar with Bechtel, we are one of the world's largest engineering, project management, and construction companies. We actually specialize in what I would call mega projects. So things like the containment facility at Chernobyl, some of the launch facilities for NASA, major. We're currently working right now on a large metro project for Riyadh. So mega engineering is what we specialize in, and we are over 100 years old, probably hitting in right about 125 years old. So actually, our first construction project was the Hoover Dam. So as you can imagine, we have a very large alumni community that we want to tap into, that we want to keep in touch with, and as I said, really with the goal that we can get them back to us in the future.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. Such a breadth of those projects. I had no idea. That's cool. Well, thank you all for joining. So my first question for you all is that you've kind of been on the PeoplePath platform for varying lengths of time. And I want to get a feel for kind of different experiences. So Sharon, you've been on with us the longest. What do you see, what do alumni get the most value out of in your program and on the platform?
Yeah, so we've had our PeoplePath platform up for about 4-ish years at this point. And what really was the turning point for us was when we were able to offer a job board to our alumni. We know that in professional services, we are really looking at how we can support our alumni throughout their careers and in those times of need and transition in their careers. And so where a lot of our communications and materials that we put out, I would say, have multiple audiences that are of interest to our alumni, but also to people who might be considering joining the firm or even people who are currently at the firm. The job board was something that we really said, okay, this is something that is uniquely a benefit for our alumni. We do share it internally as well. But that was what really prompted us to create that. And what I think has been to broaden that out as outside of law firms, I think why that's been really successful for us is that it's both an area of need and it's an area where we can constantly be adding relevant content. So we're constantly adding jobs to the job board, and then people can get alerts notifying them when those jobs match their criteria, which keeps driving them back to the portal, keeps them engaged. We definitely try to do that with other types of content, but we have the most success with the job board.
That makes sense, especially given everything this year, right? I'm sure it's very trafficked.
Yes, highly.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Ellen, you've been with us for a little while now and are still kind of getting some things going. What are some early wins that you've seen so far?
Sure. So we have been now with PeoplePath for a little over a year. We launched in November of last year. And I will say that from an alumni program perspective, so Bechtel we launched our alumni program in 2018 with a different provider at the time. And I was brought in about a year into the program to kind of do an overall just reevaluation recommendation on what we could do to make it better, right? So after about a year, we had about 4,000 members. That was split pretty evenly between current employees and actual alumni members, but we had very limited engagement. So what we had found with the program was that we had a lot of folks who came, they would check it out once, they might sign up, check it out once, and then they weren't coming back. So for us, it was very much around, what could we do to increase that engagement, but also keeping in mind that we weren't, from a budget perspective, we weren't going to get all kinds of, massive new budget in order to do this. So looking for what were the, again, kind of quick wins, what could we do with the resources that we had? And I would say probably one of the most immediate fixes that we made, which has definitely been a win for us, is enabling a direct integration between our SAP HR system and our alumni platform. So in our previous platform, there was no integration between those systems. What would happen is when employees would leave as part of their offboarding process, they would get an email inviting them to sign up for the platform. So they would go, they'd provide some information that we would then have to manually verify, to see if they were actual alumni members, and then they would be granted access, right? So it was a very cumbersome process, I would say, both for the program, or from a programmatic perspective, from the team managing it, as well as, for the employees. So that was one of the first things we did, is we created that direct integration. So now, when folks are leaving, all of our existing employees automatically have profiles in the network with some base information from SAP that they can then build out. And then when they leave, they are just automatically converted to alumni members, and then we push a few invitations asking them to, again, kind of expand out their profile. I would say that's probably, that alone was a significant impact for us, because, again, not only did it kind of relieve that administrative burden, but again, since we primarily use our platform for talent acquisition, it also meant that we now had access to that candidate pool, right? So whether or not those folks were actively logging in or participating on the platform, we still had a way that we could communicate with them, that we could push information about specific positions or projects or higher career events that we were doing. So that has been really key too. And I will say that, I think as a result of that and some of the other changes that we made, we've been able to increase our active participation from, again, we had about 2,000 active alumni members prior to the change. We're now sitting at about 12,000 active alumni members who are logging in and participating on the platform, which has been great.
Amazing. Like, just to, it's not a simple switch, I don't want to undersell it, but just connecting the dots in that way just makes things so much easier for you, for the experience of the alumni. Like, I love to hear that. That's awesome. Cool. Thank you. Brendan, you mentioned that you were just recently, a long time back, so it was May 2021. So you're the new kid on the block, and you're starting with a pilot, right? So how was the implementation process? Like, did anything jump out at you as really useful or helpful when you got started with IBM?
Yeah, no, like you mentioned, it's fairly new, it's fairly recent. I would say the number one thing for us was learning to communicate the value of alumni networks. And we really were able to get that not only from Marius and the team, but also talking to other PeoplePath clients. We were able to talk to SAP, we were able to talk to Accenture, and I believe the third was Oliver Wyman, if I'm not mistaken. But we were able to talk to other alumni program groups and understand what they find as the value in it. And that really enabled us to kind of take a three-pronged approach to our leadership and say, using your alumni, you can get better brand advocacy by building those champions in the market. Then, as was mentioned, as Ellen mentioned, there's the recruiting aspect, the talent acquisition. You have access to that talent pool and their wider network. And then, another one that kind of really stuck out to us was being able to track the business development, being able to showcase, we do X, Y, and Z with our alumni in business every year. I think those things were massive in selling it to our leadership, but also massive in our understanding of what do we need this alumni network to do and how do we get it to that place.
That's great. And you are moving north towards a global program now because you kind of found that really quickly, right?
Correct. Yeah. So it launched fairly quickly, fairly successfully. And we've taken it from a regional pilot that was just in the US, focused on our executive alumni. And Kelsey Weisgold, who's on the call today, is taking it forward and building out the global program so that we can expand this and, really get this ball rolling with a company as large as IBM.
Exciting. I'm sure there's quite a bit of work underway, but that's very exciting. Before we move on to the next question, I wanted to address one that was in the chat. So Vita asked, do you have a time frame? I think this is more for Ellen, who was talking about the active alumni, but do you have a time frame for what's considered an active alumni, logging in weekly, monthly? How do you think about that in terms of what's active?
So we do, I would say for us, it's quarterly, because that's typically like we're pushing our content on a quarterly, like newsletters. A lot of that stuff is being pushed quarterly. So we feel like that's a good representation. Again, we're not expecting that somebody would necessarily be coming back every week to view the site. But it is, again, we try to market around the times when we are pushing out, doing major like communications efforts.
That makes sense.
And Jen, to piggyback on that, I really like that within the platform, you're able to view the click-through rates on communications. That's another thing that was extremely helpful for us as we tried to determine, what works in our newsletters and what doesn't. As we build it out, it's like making sure we get the right content to the people that will actually get them engaged. So I love that the platform gives you that capability.
Yeah, definitely. We mentioned in the last session, and we'll mention in the next one too, but there's going to be a webinar that will focus more on reporting, because we realize it's such an important part of the whole experience and just creating that value and sharing it outward. So we'll dive more into that in the future for absolutely, but that's good to hear. Laura Singer has a question in the chat about how to engage people on the site and where they're going. So it actually leads perfectly into our next question, which was just engagement is the #1 question we get all the time. So Sharon, you've got some of the most engaged alumni on your platform. So what's your secret?
I wouldn't say there's any one secret, but I think what we do really well is communication and repetition. And providing a wide variety of different types of ways to engage. So we know that for some people, they're coming to us because they're interested in looking at the job board. Some people want to hear the news about the organization. Some people are looking for continuing legal education credits. Whatever those buckets are of greatest need, we want to make sure that we're continually filling all of those. And reiterating that constantly, because we know that people's needs are changing over time. So we are kind of an incrementalist organization. We like to do things slowly but very well. And so we, over many years, really built up the frequency of our communications. And we're now sending out emails once a month to our alumni. So we're really trying to figure out what is enough without being too much. And sort of to that question about how you identify an active alum, the things that I'm looking at are how many people are actually unsubscribing. Our unsubscribe rates are exceptionally low, which makes me think that we're not overwhelming them. They would be opting out more if that was the case. And I also, at least for, in the legal sphere, where I think people tend to be lurkers a little bit more, they want to engage, but don't want to look at things, but don't necessarily want to comment or like or share. So we're really looking at engagement over longer periods of time. So how many alumni are logging into the site over the course of a 12-month period? How many alumni are opening our communications over the course of a 12-month period? And those I find to be really powerful numbers, especially like with our communications, whether we can compare them with non-alumni clients of the firm. And in terms of the communications themselves, when we're doing things on a broad scale, my brother was a magazine editor back in the days when people would buy actual physical magazines. And his approach was always that if you had, when there's sort of the cover image and there's all the little bits of content, he said if he had 3 things on the cover that were interesting to someone, they would buy a copy. And that's kind of the approach that I take with the newsletters that we send out, is I want to make sure there's one event invitation and one CLE and one piece of alumni news and one piece of firm news and one well-being article, and just trying to hit all those different marks so that people know that all those things are there for them. And it really sets us up as their kind of go-to resource as those needs change over time.
I really love that. When you think about it, the visualization of it, right? Like, even now I look at a magazine at a grocery store and I'm just like, oh man, I'll buy this if it's a couple of different things. It's so smart. But I love the application to a homepage or a newsletter for your alumni, because they all have different interests and different ways of consuming content, whether it's, a podcast or an article to read. Everyone's got different styles, right? So that's so cool that you zeroed in on that. Ellen, what are some of the things that you've been working on since your launch? What kind of things do you have in plan for 2022?
Sure. So I will say, so for us, when I took this over, we didn't push a lot of, actually, we didn't push any content. So the content that we had on the site, it was very static. We didn't have engagement with our corporate communications team, right? So we had a single person who was running the site. Because it was just a single person running the site, we really didn't have any capability to add new content or custom content. So a lot of what was on there was just repurposed from other Bechtel properties. So I think that was one of the first changes that we made, was really engaging our corporate communications team as partners in the site and in developing content. So we started to create custom articles for the site. I will say, like, one of the ones that, and we do monitor a lot, particularly with the articles that we're putting out, what folks are reading, what they're responding to. We have found that I'd say the largest percentage of engagement is usually around kind of personal stories and also diversity and inclusion. So that was one of the things, and one of the things that we looked at as a whole is, as opposed to just doing an RSS feed from our externally facing like news page, what was content that was available to our employees that we could repurpose for our alumni community as well. And so again, some of the things that we were doing around diversity and inclusion that, again, was advertised very well within our employees, but again, our alumni didn't have access to. So we started repurposing some of that. We started doing we did a custom article, again, since we were very TA focused, where we went out and interviewed some recent rehires, folks who had been with Bechtel, left and came back, and talked to them about their journey and why they left and what brought them back, and published that got a lot of interest. We have also started looking at, particularly like from a benefits perspective, when we are doing events or things that are benefits related and benefits that our alumni would still have access to, right? Like, so we were doing our 401k provider was doing a workshop that was going to be available to employees, and we said, let's open this up to our alumni as well, because there's probably many alumni out there who still have their retirement accounts through our provider, right? That's one that got a lot of hits too. And then we've done a lot just, again, around talent acquisition, right? So we recently did a virtual career fair that was specifically targeted. We have a couple projects that are coming up that both in the US and in the UK that we wanted to do a virtual career fair. We wanted to target an alumni audience. So, we set up the event, we pushed it through the alumni network, posted it there. We were able to send communications specifically to alumni from those areas to alert them to the event. That type of thing has gotten a lot of traction as well. And then I would say, as far as what we're looking at for the future, again, we kind of we don't have a huge budget. So it's, what can we do that's not going to necessarily cost a lot, but is going to have a high impact. So looking forward for next year, we are looking at doing some more podcasts and like virtual town halls with some of our leadership and alumni members to give them that access. Again, and it's access that within Bechtel's community, because we are as old as we are, we also are still a family-owned company. We find that a lot of our former employees, like, they have a very personal connection to the company and to the family. So any opportunity to see Brendan speak or to hear from him about, again, what's going on within the organization, or even just what's going on within the family, because again, he's 6th generation CEO. So just hearing what's going on with his father, and again, leaders that we've had in the past, our alumni really respond to. So we're going to try and leverage that as well, to just, again, keep fostering that personal connection.
I love that. And it's like, a lot of us, I think, struggle with budget, especially in the last couple of years. And so just thinking about where you can insert and just make natural connections, I think, is so huge, and you have a lot to unpack there too, with, just the different types of content. And it's just time. If you can get time from leadership, that's the access that alumni need. I just love hearing that. So yeah, engagement is a tricky thing to uncover, but once you kind of tap into what you think they want, or if you've surveyed them and they know what they want, give them what they want. Right. So I love that. Brendan, so what are some things that IBM is thinking through in the beginning and is working on now for engagement?
Yeah, so a lot of what we thought through initially is kind of what's already been touched on, is understanding the different users. We kind of went and did some user research and understood, what are the benefits and what are people looking for? You have your people who are just interested in being social and staying engaged with, their former colleagues and what's going on. And then you have those that want to be up to date on the current events that are happening at IBM and, where's IBM moving in its next strategic direction. You have those that are career oriented and are really interested in the job board. And so they each have their different reasons for coming back. So understanding how can we give each of them something they want so that they engage with us on the alumni network was what we really thought through in the beginning. And we tried to just give everyone a sample platter, didn't make it too complex, didn't make it too robust. We gave a little bit of everything to see what worked and what didn't. And, as the team builds it out globally, we're doing the same thing in the DACH region and sampling that out and saying, how can we make this work for the different regions? Because different regions for IBM are going to want different things. So it's just understanding the users and understanding how can we reach them, as Ellen said, with minimal cost, but high impact.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, segmentation is so huge, right? So I love the motivations. We did some research on that a few years ago with the career and the social and things like that. And I think that's so important. But then you also have to think about it too. It's somebody who's more senior might not need the same things as somebody who's junior, right? So even segmenting within the career focus, right? So you can cut things a million different ways. And it's important because then you're going to kind of get someone who's, maybe recently left in the beginning of their career to grow with them, and then maybe they come back in that senior position later on because you've helped them develop, even though they weren't a part of your company. So I love that. I love that mindset of thinking through it. So that's great. We've all had to kind of pivot, virtually in the last couple of years. So what do you think is here to stay? Do you think this is going to be virtual for a while, or your events kind of both in person, virtual? Like, what are we seeing? Are you seeing people coming back into wanting to be in person? We asked that question earlier when we first started, if we even want to come back into person. So what are you seeing with the alumni? How are things going with that kind of engagement? Anyone can start.
I'll go ahead and get started on this one. I'd say for us, we're seeing that the world's going to exist in both places, both virtually and in person going forward. So there are things that we can do virtually that can reach all of our alumni. And then we can also curate local events to bring people together, where they are. And I think it's going to be a balance of both. The mass information we want to get out, our newsletters, those will likely be regionally focused. We're going to push it out to everyone in the US, everyone in North America. But we also want to be able to get people in the DC area together to come together for an in-person event. So just finding that balance, I think, is going to be what's key going forward. But I think virtual is here to stay for most people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ellen or Sharon, thoughts?
Yeah, I can say for Bechtel, I would say we will be predominantly virtual for a while. Again, for us, coming into this with a tighter budget, we were already trying to figure out how are we going to make how are we going to be able to do in-person events at, again, a minimal cost, right? So this transition has really been, I'd say, it's been a good opportunity for us, right? And because again, we can do things that can reach a very broad audience, with a lower cost associated to it. So I would say that is definitely part of it. The other piece is that for us as a global company, our alumni team is pretty lean and mean. And so in order to be able to curate events globally, virtual works very well for that as well. Is that we can coordinate with, we can put something on that can be hosted from here that is targeted to a different region. So I would say, and again, we find that from a talent acquisition perspective that I think candidates, and again, this is, we're really talking about alumni as candidates, that I think candidates prefer the virtual experience, right? Because it means less time out of their schedule to attend events. So like I said, we've done a couple virtual career fairs now that have worked really well. And so we're probably looking just across the board within TA at more virtual events in general, because there does seem to be a good appetite for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you catch more people that way sometimes too, who maybe were more introverted and didn't want to go out to a thing. When we switched to virtual events a couple of years ago, 2020, we actually found so many people that were like, if we're in San Francisco and you're in the Bay Area, I'm never going to go up to San Francisco, but you'd switch to virtual and all of a sudden I'll go to everything you want. So yeah. It was just great to see new people and new fresh faces. So yeah. Sharon, anything to add on virtual or in person?
Yeah, I think echoing what's been said, we'll certainly be doing a blend. Law is a relationship-based business, and lawyers are very anxious to get back in person as soon as they can. But I think they've really seen, sometimes to their chagrin, that there is a benefit to doing the virtual events, partly for the reasons that have been articulated, and that we can reach anyone. It gives us the breadth that we don't have with a local event. But the other thing I'm really aware of is that, we talk about the Sidley community or the Sidley family, and we can really involve like the whole person in these, right? Because we're right in their living room. And so in the before times, we would always, when we were trying to pick swag that we were going to give away at an event, like one of the questions we evaluated was, is this a thing they can take home and give to their kids? Because that's the kind of thing people want. They'll be like, oh, I don't need this pen, but my kid will like it, and they'll take it. And so that's sort of how we visualized our virtual event last year was, if we're going to be in people's living rooms with their whole family, we better be sure we're doing something that's family friendly. And I think people really appreciated that. So it just helps us think about people, the members of our community, as people, and their whole person.
We did the same thing. We got a magician for one of our events, a virtual magician, which you should think that shouldn't work, but we loved it so much. We actually brought it into other employee events throughout the rest of the month because it was just so fun. Our partners got really into it, and it's just, it was just, you get to be more creative sometimes. And it didn't cost that much. I think it was like $600. Like, where in the world are you going to do an in-person event for $600? So it was, sometimes you get to be more creative out of the box. So I love that. Moving into, we think about how we communicate, we think about the events and engagement, but ultimately we have people we all answer to. So what do you find important when it comes to tracking everything, the success of the program, the events? What kinds of things are your executives focusing on?
So I'll chime in on that one. It's been interesting because I've been given a lot of independence in this. There are not many things that I'm being asked for. So I've kind of had to find my own way in terms of what are the most powerful metrics to share. And there are some quantifiable things. And what I find is interesting is sometimes, like, I'll get a stat that I think is really great, that we have, X% of alumni logging into the portal and updating their profile. And I know, relative to others, that it is a good statistic. And then I share it internally and people are like, that sounds low, that needs to be higher. So I tread a little carefully with that kind of thing, because I really try to stick with the handful of statistics that are universally powerful, and definitely considering my audience. But ultimately, I have found, because there have been questions over the years that have been raised about, direct bottom line tracking that we can do, which is hard. But on the whole, our leadership has said they don't even want to see that. They know that it supports the bottom line and they're comfortable with that. And I think as a result, I've been more focused on the qualitative side of things and storytelling. They're fine to see, a 90+% open rate kind of figure, over some period of time. They're equally happy to see like a baby in a Sidley onesie. So, it's sometimes just finding the right way to connect with people emotionally, and remind them of, the value of the people in the community, and how that builds a community that goes really beyond the bottom line.
Sounds nice and balanced. I love that. What about Alan or Brendan? Any thoughts on tracking?
So I can
Yeah.
go. Oh,
Go ahead,
sorry. Go
Ellen.
ahead.
Go ahead, Ellen.
So I do a quarterly dashboard for our chief HR officer on the program and performance. And so I can tell you that the types of things that our leadership is interested in that I'm usually reporting on, again, the active engagement. So folks that are logging into the platform, that is one that our leadership looks at pretty closely. Again, because we are very talent acquisition focused, we also look at things like, what the application conversion rate is. Folks who start their application via the alumni network, how does their site visit convert to an actual application? And then also their application completion rate. Those are two things that, again, we look at pretty closely, along with just overall number of hires that we're getting through the program. I would say those are the biggest ones. In addition, then again, because we are looking at how can we keep folks engaged, we are also looking at content engagement, and what articles are people looking at, what is generating the most interest, what's getting the most click-throughs, so that we can curate content around that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've kind of broken it down into your day-to-day metrics, the community health, who's doing what, because that informs the bigger goals, those business drivers. And so those big ones, which are a little harder to put together, the returning people, right? That's the number one thing you need in talent acquisition, but everything else supports that. So yeah, you kind of need a mix of both, but that sounds pretty healthy. So love that. Brandon.
Yeah, so I mean, we're still in our infancy, but it's pretty much the same thing. Right now we've got 3 dashboards set up for reporting. One is, our user engagement or user registrations. And that's just simply to show we're actively getting more and more alumni registered. It's not being stagnant. We're working to bring more people on. And then the other is we're looking at the job board. What are people looking at on the job board? How many people are looking at the job board to make sure we're utilizing it to its best capabilities. And then the last is just a content engagement, understanding what the alumni who are here are interested in. I would say the first 2 are probably reported more to leadership. And the last is used more for the internal alumni team to make sure we're getting the most out of the platform.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I used to think about all the things I would track just for my own purposes that probably never saw the light of day, to anybody else, but I found them fascinating.
Yeah, those are those numbers that we know as being a part of the alumni team. Oh, this is great. This is really great compared to other alumni programs. But if you were to tell it outside to senior leadership, they're like, okay, what does that tell me?
Yeah, exactly. You never know what something's you need to have this. So you just track everything and see what happens, right? Love that. I want to take a break here and see if there's any questions from the audience. We have another 20 minutes or so, but I want to make sure that anyone here is needing something in specific. So Danya, so what about measuring alumni who provide new business? So I think, Sharon, you're more business development focused than other Eleanor. How do you focus on that?
Yeah, so I do track that. It's more anecdotal. We don't have a process when new business is being set up to capture that information systematically. So there are a couple different places that I go within the firm to hunt for it. Some are internal, news roundups that we share. We have an experience management database where some of that information is stored, and I'm able to set up searches to look for that. But ultimately, it's pretty manual. What I do try to do with whatever new business that I find out about is promote that internally as part of that narrative that we're trying to create. So I do a quarterly internal communication that covers a variety of different pieces of information. And the first one is alumni referred new business. Because for a lot of people, they like to see that reinforced. They're not looking again for numbers, and I'm not including dollar figures or anything of that nature, but it's just saying, this is the new client, this is the type of work we're doing, and this is the alum who referred it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know those systems are sometimes hard to connect in any company. What we did was we looked at the top 10 companies that we worked with, and then did we have alumni at those? And we would push a little bit more. Maybe we would do an event or a breakfast or something to get people within that company to meet because they didn't know each other, but they had this thing in common. So sometimes just saying we did an event at client X that was our number 5 most referred business or something. So even if we couldn't say X business came from an alumni, we're able to say that we were at least acknowledging our top 10 most important clients and the alumni at them and things like that. So yeah, I think business development is a tough nut to crack, but very manual, but useful in a lot of ways. So let's see. So we have a couple more questions. So from Vida, how do people measure brand advocacy? Does anyone include Net Promoter Score? It's a data point I'd love to have, but don't yet feel comfortable asking the question directly. So does anyone here use NPS for their alumni communities?
So we've done 2 things to track brand advocacy. One, we've included a link to Glassdoor where we can track directly who has rated IBM on Glassdoor using the alumni platform. So that's one way we track the brand advocacy and what people are saying about us in the market. The other is Net Promoter Score. I'm not sure what the results of that were. I went out on paternity leave when the questionnaire was sent out. But it is something we've thought about, and it is important. It's something that people want to know. Net Promoter Score is universally recognized, as valuable. So the more you can understand that, even if it's bad the first time around, I would say it helps you understand what you're missing or what you're doing wrong, or how to rephrase the questions if you didn't quite get the responses you anticipated. So I would say go for it, even if you don't feel comfortable asking. I think it's a question that you just gotta dive into.
Yeah, you can't be afraid of feedback, right? Even if sometimes you don't want it. But you'd be surprised. More often than not, people are more generous and favorable and positive than you'd expect. So we used to do ours every 2 years. And I have survey templates. So if anyone wants to email me after this, I'm happy to share those templates, what they look like, and a couple different versions, some long, some short, but things that we've seen clients use. I'm happy to share those after this. But any other thoughts on brand advocacy or NPS? No? Okay. Brendan, you're very popular. So we have another question here. Starting from scratch, how did you do with finding a list of all of your alumni?
Gotcha. Yeah. So for the very beginning, for the pilot, we focused very much on a particular segment. We drilled down to not only geography, but also experience level. So we only focused on our executives here in the US to start. And then we slowly expanded that out to everyone in the US. And I think that really helped us narrow the focus. Because it is a lot of manual work unless you do an integration with your HR system. Ellen mentioned that earlier. So keeping your numbers small, if you're not going to do the integration immediately, I think is really beneficial. It helps a little if you do the integration, you can expand a lot quicker. But I think that's what we did. We were like, okay, let's find where we have our biggest need. And, our focus this year was really our executive talent. So let's focus on our executive alumni and bring them into the pilot and then grow and expand it.
Follow-up question for that. How far back did you go when they left IBM?
So for the list, we went back as far as 5 years. However, we didn't close it to any alumni that found out about the program. So if an alumni registered and they were a legitimate alumni, we allowed them in. But our target audience, we only went back 5 years.
Thank you. And then the other question is about Glassdoor. So are you showing the link to all alumni on the platform, or are you just contextualizing for some?
So at the moment, we show the link to all alumni on the platform. And that's because we do a bit of a sanitation of who we allow into the platform beforehand. We kind of check to make sure that they are rehire eligible and, they weren't fired for cause and shouldn't have any reason to just hate IBM. They may not have had a great experience, but they don't have a reason to hate us. So we show the link to everyone because we don't expect anyone to go on there and give us a 0-star rating.
It's risky, but I love it.
It's very risky, but we like to think we treat people right. So hopefully it works out.
Plus, I think it's almost a better story to say that, right? That it's like, we've got nothing to hide. Everybody can answer this question, And so there's going to be some negative ones, and there should be, right? If it was all positive, I would be like, wait a second, that can't be right, So that makes sense. Another question, how did you build your virtual events for the year, especially starting out? So anyone could take that one.
We did basically one large virtual event. So we have different in-person events that take place in different markets. And when our largest market was looking at doing a virtual event, we suddenly realized, well, we don't have to do this by market anymore. We should make this national. The budget planning and everything for this year was complicated, to say the least. But we were able to embellish a little bit by doing the event and then shipping out some gifts to the people who participated or RSVP'd. So that was, I think, kind of a nice additional touch point that even, we actually also did a magic show with an organization in Chicago that the firm actually has some connections to through alumni. So it was a really nice story to be able to tell from that perspective. But then even people who, RSVP'd, but then didn't end up showing or whatever, they still got the present, they still got the touch point. And I think that was really nice. And in one other market, we also did, we did not do an event, but we did do like a holiday gift that was just around the time when we would have had our annual alumni reception. So that was kind of the approach we took.
Nice. Yeah. Just thinking about it in small chunks probably is a lot easier. And then seeing what you can apply to a broader audience is also a nice perk of it all, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of deciding between what do you want large audiences for that are going to be something like this, where it's not super engaging breakout rooms, all that kind of stuff, right? Versus something more small where you want maybe 10 to 15 people so they can still kind of network and get that connectivity, right? So just thinking about what events are better suited for small or large, and then really just time zone, right? So, not everyone's going to wake up at 6 a.m. on the West Coast for a 9 a.m. event on the East Coast. So you have to play around with that a little bit too.
We were also very cognizant of like what was going on in the world. And, that we wanted the nature of the event to be something really uplifting because people just appreciated having a break and having something they could just, smile and enjoy. So that counts for a lot too.
Yeah, one of our biggest events actually was in Germany. We did a wine tasting event, and the benefit actually was because we were mailing them packages. We had to do it a certain amount of time ahead of time to make sure they got it. But we got so much information on the platform, updated mailing addresses and everything else that we might need for other things. So it was just this nice opportunity for us to kind of clean up our data a bit. But also people came out of the woodworks, and even if they didn't get it, we said, what, the first 50 people were going to get one of these boxes. We still had 75 people at the event, and we tried to ship out as many extras as we could, but they were like, no, we were happy just to like hang out, watch all of you have fun opening up these boxes of presents, So it's, that uplifting feeling, I think, is what people are still seeking out, 2 years into this. So, Brendan or Ellen, any thoughts on the virtual events getting started?
Some of our virtual events fell flat on their face. So we tried, but it was a learning experience. You learn what not to do. And so you just move forward, and that was our approach. We tried, we failed, and we tried again. Eventually we get better at, targeting what the event is for and finding that happy message that you bring to the alumni.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Surveys might help there too. We used to follow up our events with, did you like this? Would you want more of it? That kind of thing. Why didn't you attend? Those kind of questions. So that could help.
Yeah, and I would say for us, we're, again, because it's very, very TA focused. Our events have been more recent as our hiring has gone up and as our needs have gone up. And so I would say similarly, it is kind of a, a bit of a learning curve, right? So like I said, we just did a couple virtual career fairs. So we utilized some event management software that we had related to university hiring and repurposing that for, for a experienced hire event. And again, we kind of pushed the registration and stuff out on the alumni page, we targeted it based on region, like location, again, because we knew that the positions that were coming up, they were going to be in the US, in the Houston area and in London. So, we went in and we looked at, our alumni communities in those locations to push out invitations. And I would say we did come out with a lot of lessons learned just in managing, for that type of event, virtual, like you really need to manage the flow of the participants, which we initially kind of said, let anyone like show up whenever you want, which got a bit challenging because we had hundreds of people. So again, and like managing, pushing those folks into breakout rooms with individual hiring managers. So definitely lessons learned there that, we're kind of, again, tweaking a bit as we go.
Yeah, it makes sense. I used to look at someone and be like, we could put a webinar together in like 2 weeks, right? And I'm like, what, why? Just because it's online, it's not easier to actually do more work, right?
Yeah. It was definitely, again, definitely interesting. And again, learned a lot just about, again, controlling that flow. I think that's the biggest thing, particularly when you're talking about large events like that, where folks are going to be actually interacting with one another. That was a critical lesson learned.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of trial and error, but stressful. You're just happy when it's over and hopefully people had a good experience, but always, yeah, that debrief is usually quite important. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know if anyone's quite figured out the perfect way to do this yet. I think everyone's still kind of feeling their way through this, both with budget and what alumni want and what we're capable of doing. So I would encourage all of you to share with each other, connect on LinkedIn and everyone in the audience, just try to learn from other people as we're doing here today, and we'll get there. But, a couple other questions have come in. So Ellen, as part of the auto enroll, did you just sign them up for the alumni network or also opt in for communications?
So we have much more of an opt out versus opt in. So basically we did a dump of, we basically took everything from our SAP system. So all of our current active employees, and then any former employee in SAP, which SAP has been our HRIS for about 20 years. So it went back about 20 years. And then what we did is we, for our current employees, their access is through our single sign-on. So they literally, for them, if they navigate to it through our internal webpage, they click and it just logs them straight in, and they just kind of have a base profile similar to any other system that we have within the company, right? What we did as far as the communication is we did 3 communications. So we did one, obviously at launch, just letting folks know, hey, you have access to this, encouraging them to log in, right? So for alumni members, they were sent login credentials, like here's how you can access. We did that again 2 weeks later. And then we did the third one, I think it was like at 2 months. And then at that point, if folks were not logging in, if they hadn't gone in, accepted the privacy statement, then we turned off communication. So we're not spamming. We still have them, but it was basically we gave you up to 2 months to engage, and if you didn't, then we turn off the community so that you're not automatically receiving communications. And that is the workflow that is set up when individuals, new individuals leave, right? It's the same cadence. They get 3 emails basically encouraging them to log on and update their profile, and again, accept the data privacy statement. And if they don't, we just shut off the communication.
That's fair. Makes sense. Cool. We have one last question. How are you in your platforms using the groups feature? And what's working well, what isn't? Are any of you using the groups functionality?
We're not.
Yeah. We are not either, although it is something that I am pushing very, very heavily for. So we have the groups set up, but we just, from a team perspective, we don't have the resources to be able to manage them. So what we're trying to do is trying to get our individual business units and some of our employee resource groups to take ownership of their particular group pages and start owning those, but we haven't gotten a lot of traction yet.
Yeah, I would echo that. Groups are always something wants. I would say start broad to start, right? Big groups that a lot of people can join in. Don't segment too far down because you might get a group of 5 people and they're not going to be active, right? So think broad, start that way, and not many of them. That's my just general community management best practice. But I think that's the smart way to do it, to start to think about who else in the company can help you manage them, because you do want the group to be alumni starting that conversation, but you do want people in the company to add in and kind of moderate and add in just thought pieces and just other interesting content that keeps it alive and well. But great questions. We have a couple minutes left. And then we're going to switch into the platform features and product roadmap for the second session for all of those who were just joining for the first session this time around. So you can just stay in this room. No one has to move anything. I will hand it back to Charlotte momentarily. And for everyone who joined us in the first session, and this was your second, thank you for joining us. And I think we have one last question I'll take here from the audience, just since we have a few minutes. But do you have any tricks for keeping alumni roles and companies up to date? I assume we on this call are all very good LinkedIn stalkers. So if anyone has any ideas here.
So I guess just to clarify the question, I mean, are you talking about keeping the open positions up to date, or I'm not sure.
I think it's more about the data, the alumni profile information. How do you keep like their most up to date current? So yeah, no current role in company.
Again, I think it's, I mean, that just for us, it kind of comes back to the engagement, right? I mean, it's getting them to log back into the platform, and then our platform is set up automatically. I'm assuming many are, where if you log in and you haven't made a change in a while, that's the first thing that it will say to you, is that we see you haven't updated within a certain time frame, and try to encourage them to redirect towards their actual profile to make updates.
Yeah, and very similar. We have the workflow set, so where, you know, if someone hasn't updated their profile, the platform will prompt them to update it, and it's just really using your workflow to try and help maintain that data integrity.
We also try to leverage the knowledge within our organization. So we have syncs set up so that if people have synced their contacts and then someone within the organization updates an alum's record, that will then cascade through the system.
All smart. Yeah. So I think it's ultimately back to that engagement question. The more people you can get back and engaging and being a part of the community, the better the data will be, the better the experience will be, the better your metrics, success, and everything else will be as well. So with that, I will end it here since we're at time. We probably could have kept going for another half hour, really. But I want to thank everyone, Sharon, Brandon, and Ellen, for all of your incredible insights today and for taking the time to share this with us and the group.